The silence in the boardroom broke like glass when the CEO slammed his fist on the table and pointed straight at Elena Ortiz, the cleaner who wasn't supposed to be standing anywhere near the long, polished oak board table. "You are just a cleaner. Know your place." The room froze. The board members stared. Elena held her mop a little tighter, because in exactly 4 minutes, every person in that room, including the man shouting at her, would discover the truth he never imagined. She owned more of the company than he did. If you love powerful stories about class, respect, and unexpected twists, stay with me. This one will hit you hard. And don't forget to like, share, and follow for more shocking life stories. The boardroom was a place of spotless glass walls, expensive leather chairs, and cold ambition, a world far above Elena's pay grade. She wasn't supposed to be here, not during meetings, not during presentations, not during anything important. But she'd been called to clean a spill outside the room, and when she stepped inside quietly to retrieve her cleaning cart, the CEO of Westbridge Financial, Charles Rowan, decided that was the perfect moment to demonstrate his power. He stood at the head of the table, a man in his early 60s with iron gray hair and a polished navy suit that probably cost more than Elena's monthly rent. His sharp jaw tightened as he noticed her near the doorway. "Why are you in here?" he snapped. Elena startled. I, I just need to get my cart. Someone asked me to clean, not during my meeting." His voice cut through the air like a blade. She froze, feeling every pair of eyes turn toward her. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'll go." But Charles wasn't finished. He walked toward her, each step echoing through the silent room. Behind him, the board members shifted uncomfortably. Some looked away. Some watched with morbid curiosity. "Do you think this is your place?" His voice was loud enough for everyone to hear. "This is a boardroom. Executives work here. People with real jobs." Elena swallowed, forcing her voice to stay calm. "I didn't mean to interrupt." Charles leaned closer, lowering his tone just enough to make the humiliation feel more personal. "You are just a cleaner. Know your place." The words hit harder than he knew, but Elena didn't respond. She simply stepped aside, her fingers gripping the mop handle until her knuckles whitened. Behind her, the board members exchanged uneasy glances. One of them, a woman in a charcoal gray suit named Victoria Hale, looked like she wanted to say something, but she didn't. Not yet. No one dared to challenge the CEO. No one except fate. Elena was 26, but life had aged her heart faster than her face. She worked 2 jobs, morning shifts at an elderly care facility and evening shifts at Westbridge Financial as a cleaner. She lived in a tiny studio apartment. She took the bus everywhere. She sent half her paycheck to her younger brother to help him through school. To Charles Rowan, she was invisible. To the rest of the company, she was background noise. To herself, she was simply someone trying to survive. But what no one knew, what no one imagined, was that Elena Ortiz was not just a cleaner. She was the daughter of Gabriel Ortiz, the late founder of Westbridge Financial. And through a trust agreement written years ago, long before her father died, Elena legally held 31% of the company's shares. Charles held only 18%. The board held the rest. Elena never claimed her inheritance publicly. She avoided the spotlight, avoided the corporate world, and avoided everything that reminded her of the father she lost too young. Cleaning floors felt simpler than living up to the ghost of the man who built an empire. She didn't want power, she just wanted peace. But Charles Rowan had taken even that from her when he seized the company after her father's death, edging her out, manipulating the board, and burying her existence under layers of corporate silence. She hadn't fought him, until today. The humiliation in the boardroom wasn't the worst part, it was what came after. As Elena rolled her cart away, she overheard the CEO raising his voice, not at her this time, but at the board. "We need to finalize the acquisition. I don't care what it costs. I want full control of this company before next quarter." Full control. Elena paused, her heart sinking. Charles Rowan had been trying to buy out the remaining shares for years. If he succeeded, he would control everything her father ever built, everything Elena inherited, everything she spent years avoiding. Victoria Hale spoke next. Charles, the problem is we still don't know who owns the 31% held in that silent trust. The lawyer refuses to disclose their name. We cannot push a restructuring vote without their consent. Whoever it is, they're irrelevant. Probably some retiree who forgot they even own shares. Elena's chest tightened. He had no idea, but Victoria did. She glanced toward the open door just as Elena stepped back into the hallway. Their eyes met, a quiet recognition passing between them. Victoria had been her father's lawyer. She knew. She always knew. And suddenly, Elena understood something she had ignored for years. Her silence wasn't protecting her, it was empowering him. An hour later, Elena found herself outside the building, sitting on a concrete bench with her uniform still smelling faintly of disinfectant and floor cleaner. She pulled out her phone and called a number she hadn't dialed in years. The line clicked. "Elena?" Victoria's voice was warm, but cautious. "I think—" Elena hesitated. "I think it's time." There was a long silence on the other end. "I've been waiting for you to say that," Victoria replied. They agreed to meet that afternoon at Victoria's law office. As Elena walked away from the corporate tower, she felt something shift inside her. Something she thought she buried with her father. Purpose, not revenge, not ambition, not anger. Just purpose. The next afternoon, Victoria entered the boardroom carrying a sleek black folder. "Before we begin," she said calmly, "there is a matter regarding the trust holder." Charles rolled his eyes. "We don't have time for this." "You will make time," Victoria said sharply. The board murmured in surprise. Victoria placed the folder on the table. "The beneficiary of the 31% shares has chosen to reveal themselves today." Charles straightened. "Finally, who is it?" Victoria turned toward the door. A shadow appeared. Soft footsteps echoed, and Elena stepped inside the boardroom. Not in her cleaner's uniform, but in a crisp navy suit that made the entire room sit forward. Charles's jaw dropped. Elena looked at him with calm, steady eyes. Victoria announced, "Meet Elena Ortiz, majority shareholder of Westbridge Financial." The board erupted, but Charles said nothing. Because he couldn't. His words had choked themselves on the way up. The room erupted into startled whispers, scattered gasps, and the scraping of chairs as executives instinctively leaned toward one another. The air shifted so violently it was almost physical, a pressure change that made the lights above seem brighter, harsher, exposing every stunned expression around the table. Charles Rowan did not blink. His lips parted slightly, but no words came out. Not yet. His face, flushed from anger moments earlier, drained of color. For the first time in years, he looked like a man who had lost control of the room. Elena stood still, calm, her hands gently clasped in front of her. She wore none of her cleaning uniform today. Only a simple navy suit that fit her like it had been waiting for this moment as long as she had. She didn't try to look intimidating. She didn't need to. Her presence alone was enough to tilt the balance of power in the room. Victoria stepped aside, letting Elena take the head of the table with her, silence alone. It was Maya, one of the younger board members sitting on the left, who finally found her breath. "You," she murmured, leaning forward as though confirming Elena was real. "You're the beneficiary? You're the Ortiz trust holder?" Elena nodded slightly. "I am." A wave of murmurs rolled through the room. Only Charles remained motionless, still frozen between disbelief and something far sharper. Fear. Victoria placed several documents on the table, tapping them lightly with a manicured nail. "Elena Ortiz holds 31% of Westbridge Financial. That makes her the majority shareholder. She has the legal authority to attend all board meetings, propose motions, vote on corporate action items, and override acquisition attempts." Charles snapped back to life. "Absolutely not," he spat, his voice cracking at the edges. "This is absurd. This is staged. This is—" Victoria merely raised a brow. "Would you like to contest it? We can bring the trust documents, the signed statements from your predecessor, financial filings, and probate records before the board." Charles's mouth opened, but no sound followed. There was nothing to contest. He knew it, and everyone else did too. Elena finally stepped toward the table. "I'm not here to fight anyone," she said quietly. and I'm not here to take over your seats. I've stayed silent for years because this company was the last place I wanted to step into again. Her eyes softened for a brief moment. My father poured his life into Westbridge, and when he passed, I didn't feel strong enough to stand in his shadow. So I took the job that kept me close to the company without being part of it. Several board members lowered their eyes, guilt tugging at them. But, Elena continued, silence has consequences. It creates room for the wrong people to rise and for the wrong things to happen. She turned her head slowly toward Charles. And now we're here. Charles slammed a hand on the table. You manipulated us all, he hissed. You hid your ownership. You pretended to be a cleaner? Elena replied softly. Pretended? Or simply lived my life while you made assumptions about people you think are beneath you? The board members shifted again, this time in discomfort at Charles's expense. Elena leaned forward slightly. I never pretended to be anything. I took a job, I worked hard, and I stayed out of corporate drama. That's not trickery, that's just work. Charles's throat bobbed with a swallowed rage. You undermined the chain of command. I cleaned hallways, Elena said, raising a brow. Which part of that undermined anything? Maya covered her mouth to hide a smile. Others didn't bother. A few had been waiting years for someone to stand up to Charles Rowan. Victoria cleared her throat. We have several agenda items that require a majority shareholders vote. We'll begin, unless Charles has more objections. You bet I have objections, Charles roared, standing up. This girl can't run anything. She can't even understand corporate structure. She mops floors. No one spoke, but the discomfort was sharp enough to slice through the air. Elena stayed still. Then she walked toward the head of the table, Charles's seat. She didn't sit in it. She simply stood behind it, resting her hand on the leather back. Mr. Rowan, she said quietly, do you think intelligence is tied to job title, or respect, or worth? Charles took a step back. Don't twist my words. I don't need to, she replied softly. You twisted them enough already. Her gaze swept around the room. When you shouted at me yesterday, you didn't know who I was, but nothing about that moment changes who I am. Wealth doesn't make someone more deserving of respect. Titles don't make someone better. Charles scoffed. Spare us the inspirational speech. You're here because your father gave you shares, not because you earned them. Elena didn't flinch. And you're here because my father trusted you, she said calmly. Tell me, Mr. Rowan, did you earn that trust? His silence was deafening. Elena nodded to Victoria. Let's continue. The meeting stretched on for an hour, then 2. Documents were reviewed. Acquisition attempts were halted. A vote was held on several ethics concerns, most of them tied to Charles's leadership choices. Elena watched quietly at first, observing how the board communicated, how they voted, how pressure and politics shaped each moment. Charles, growing increasingly agitated, attempted interruption after interruption. She's inexperienced. She doesn't know what she's signing. Elena, you're being manipulated. You're embarrassing yourself. Let me help you. But each time, Elena responded with the same patient, level voice. I can read. I can decide. I'm not confused. I'm not afraid. And finally, I'm done letting you speak for me. Her presence alone changed everything. Board members who usually cowered under Charles's authority found their voices. Those who quietly disagreed with him now felt safe to oppose him. The atmosphere of fear began to evaporate. Charles felt it. He felt the shift, the loss, the unraveling of the empire he'd built through intimidation. He slammed his fist down again. This is chaos. You people are letting a cleaner dictate the future of this company. It was Maya who spoke first. No, she said firmly. We're letting the majority shareholder dictate the future of this company. The same way we always have. That's how boards work. Charles glared at her, then at Victoria, then at Elena. He pointed a trembling finger at Elena. You think you can walk in here and destroy everything? You think you can make decisions that affect thousands of employees? Elena met his gaze. I think, she said quietly, that what destroys companies isn't who cleans the floors. It's who leads from fear. The board murmured again. Not in surprise this time, but agreement. Charles's eyes darted around, wild, searching for someone to back him. No one did. The loyalties he'd assumed were unshakable had never been loyalty at all. Only fear. And fear was melting in real time. At last, Victoria placed a final document on the table. This motion concerns leadership restructuring, she announced, specifically confidence and continuation of Charles Rowan as CEO. Charles paled. You can't. This is insane. I built this company. You inherited your position, Victoria said coolly, same as Elena inherited her shares. One of you still respects the foundation that built this place. The other uses it as a weapon. Charles barked a laugh, bitter and sharp. You wouldn't dare. But when the vote began, hands rose around the table. 1, 2, 3, 4. Even board members he believed unwaveringly loyal to him voted against his continuation as CEO. Charles turned to the last member, a man named Brian, who had always nodded along to everything he said. Brian, Charles whispered, don't you dare. Brian's voice trembled. I'm sorry, Charles, but this company deserves better. His hand rose. Charles staggered back, as though struck. The vote was unanimous. He was finished. Elena didn't smile. She didn't celebrate. She simply looked at Charles with quiet, steady eyes. Mr. Rowan, she said softly, you told me to know my place. She stepped back from the head chair and turned slightly so he could see what she meant. This is my place, not because I'm better than anyone here, not because I deserve more, but because you tried to take away what wasn't yours. Charles stared at her, his face ashen. You'll regret this, he whispered. Elena shook her head. No, she replied. But someday I hope you regret the way you treated people who weren't in power. He drew in a slow breath but never released it, at least not in words. The board members didn't speak either. They just sat there, the weight of everything sinking into the room like a stone dropped into deep water. Elena gathered the documents. Victoria stood by her side. The board remained silent, and Charles Rowan, the man who had once used that boardroom as his personal throne, could only watch as the cleaner he humiliated walked out of the room with more dignity than he had shown in his entire career. Minutes later, when she left the boardroom, the silence still hadn't broken. Not one word, not one breath, not one sound dared follow her. The board fell silent because power had shifted, not in a scream, not in a fight, but in a quiet truth finally given its voice. The hall outside the boardroom felt different the moment Elena stepped into it. Quieter, lighter, almost as though the air itself had been waiting for her to breathe in a world where she didn't need to look down anymore. She held the documents to her chest, not because she feared losing them, but because they finally felt like something she was ready to carry. For years, she had tried to shrink herself, to stay small enough that no one could ask anything of her, expect anything from her, or hurt her in the ways power could hurt those unprepared for it. But the truth was simple and impossible to ignore now. She had never been small. She had only been hiding. Victoria walked beside her with a soft, knowing smile. You handled yourself beautifully, she said. Elena let out a breath she'd been holding for hours, maybe years. I didn't plan to say any of that. That's the thing about truth, Victoria replied. It doesn't need rehearsal. They stepped into the elevator. Elena watched her reflection in the polished walls. Not the uniform, not the mop in her hands, not the lowered gaze she had worn for so long. She saw a woman standing straight, shoulders back, eyes steady. The doors slid open to the lobby. Employees bustled around, unaware that the company had changed hands in the span of an afternoon. A few recognized her, the quiet cleaner who emptied trash bins, wiped glass surfaces, and mopped floors during late hours. Some smiled politely. Some didn't notice her at all. And somehow, she didn't want them to look at her differently. She didn't need anyone to bow, bend, or treat her like royalty. She just needed them to know she wasn't invisible. As she crossed the lobby, something unexpected happened. One of the junior employees, a young man with a stack of folders nearly slipping from his arms, hurried to the elevator but dropped half the papers. He let out a small groan as he bent to collect them. Elena knelt next to him. Here, she said with a gentle smile, gathering several sheets. Let me help. He blinked in surprise. Oh, Thank you. You're welcome. When they stood, he stared for a moment as though trying to place her face. Wait, aren't you just someone who works here? She said softly. His expression softened. Well, someone should tell a management to treat people better. She smiled. Someone just did. The young man grinned, not yet realizing who she was, and hurried off. Victoria watched the interaction silently, pride warming her eyes. He didn't know who you were, she said once Elena reached her. That's the point, Elena replied. Respect shouldn't come from power. A voice echoed from across the lobby, tentative, respectful. Elena? She turned. It was Maya, one of the board members, walking toward her. Behind her stood several others dressed in tailored suits but wearing expressions stripped completely of corporate stiffness. We wanted to apologize, Maya said softly, for not speaking up earlier, for letting him talk to you that way. Elena shook her head. You don't owe me an apology. But we do, another board member insisted. Not because of who you are now, but because we should have respected you before we knew. Elena's chest tightened, but in the softest way. Thank you, she said quietly. Maya took a breath. The board, we'd like you to consider something. Elena raised a brow. What is it? We want you to join us, not just as a shareholder, but as an active leader. You don't have to be CEO, though you have full right to be, but we want your voice in the room. Elena felt her heart slow, then race, then settle into something steady. The cleaning job had been safe, quiet, invisible. This was the opposite. Let me think about it, she said after a moment. Of course, Maya replied with a nod. Whenever you're ready. The board members drifted away, leaving Elena and Victoria standing together in the center of the lobby. What do you want to do now? Victoria asked. Elena inhaled deeply, and for the first time in years it didn't hurt. I want to go home, she said with a small laugh. Take off these shoes, drink something warm, and maybe sleep for a week. Victoria chuckled. You deserve it. Elena smiled. And after that, maybe I'll see what kind of place this company could become if people didn't lead with fear. And you? Victoria asked gently. What would you lead with? Elena looked at her reflection in the glass doors, the same eyes she'd seen her entire life, but newly unburdened. Respect, she said, and maybe a little courage. They walked out into the late afternoon sun together, the light casting long shadows behind them, as though everything Elena had been carrying for years was finally falling away. Across the street, Charles Rowan stood near the corner, his tie loosened, his expression hollow. He had exited the building earlier, alone, his authority stripped from him in minutes. He saw her now, and for the first time ever, he didn't glare or shout or try to reassert control. He simply looked lost. Elena hesitated, not out of pity, but out of understanding. Fear had shaped him into who he became. Silence had shaped her into who she had been. But today, both of them had changed. She nodded once, a gesture not of forgiveness, but acknowledgement. A quiet goodbye to the version of herself who had once trembled beneath his voice. Charles lowered his gaze. Elena turned away. She crossed the street toward the bus stop, but halfway there she paused, looked back at the massive building towered above the city, and understood something she had never allowed herself to believe. This was her place. Not because anyone gave it to her, not because she inherited it, but because she had finally chosen to claim it. The wind picked up lightly, brushing her hair across her face as she took one last breath of the day. Then she walked toward the future, waiting just beyond the corner. Not as a cleaner, not as a hidden heir, but as someone who finally knew exactly where she belonged. And this time, nobody could tell her otherwise. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and follow for more powerful stories with twists, emotion, and unforgettable lessons. Your support helps bring more stories to life.